Hey guys, so this is not my normal recording setting, but it's too nice of a day. I don't want to just be sitting inside, so I'm recording a video, and just last night I watched Andrew Hayes' All of Us Strangers 2023, so I figured I would come on here and I would talk to you guys about it spoiler free because I've not watched a movie before that emotionally affected me the way this movie did, and so yeah, let's talk about it. This isn't exactly a setting that invokes All of Us Strangers, but it's too nice. We're in Belgium, we don't get the sun here, so having the sun is just an amazing thing. So yeah, as I mentioned, I this movie got me. This movie got me a lot, and not in the normal way. Like, it's pretty common that I cry to movies. I just cried at like a bunch of movies that I watched. I think it's great to cry at movies. But this movie, I was not just crying, I was sobbing at this movie, and that's never happened before. For a lot of those reasons, especially since I want to be spoiler free for the movie itself, I can't really get into, and just some of them are personal, but I think that goes to show, and I think a lot of the other opinions I've seen on this movie back this up, that this is just, it's a really emotional movie. It really does a great job of capturing a specific feeling that it's going for, and using that feeling in an extremely potent way. There's some really impressive stuff that I didn't expect this movie to do, like directions I didn't expect this movie to take. I don't think it's really spoilers for the movie since it's in the description if you look at the movie, but this movie follows a man who falls in love with this guy who's in his apartment building, Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott. That was kind of the big selling point. But all this time, Andrew Scott is seeing his parents as ghosts. That's like the premise of the movie. He's seeing his parents who died when he was 12 as ghosts, and I knew that that was the premise, so it wasn't going to be like super duper grounded, but I just really didn't expect it to use cinematic language in the way that it did. It actually really did remind me of After Sun, which of course everybody's made the comparison to because it's Paul Mescal and you have him like dancing in a club and it's a sad movie. But it genuinely does have a lot of similar chops to After Sun, because I would also call After Sun more or less a ghost story, so it approaches its emotions in a very similar way. This has a much more, I would say, kind of punchy vibe to it. It's still very toned back, I'll get to that in a second, like in terms of pacing and actual plot, but this goes for some scenes and some shots that really get to me, and there's some lines of dialogue between Andrew Scott and his parents that, it just is so good. And the performances, of course, they're all incredible. I think Paul Mescal here is unfortunately kind of underused. I wanted him to be in the movie more. Again, I'll get to that in a second. But Andrew Scott, this is probably the best performance I've seen from him. I've never seen Fleabag, so maybe he's better in that. I've seen Sherlock, and he's much better in this than in Sherlock, but he really does such a great job of capturing this guy, this really emotional guy who's stuck in this apartment with no one around him, and who's trying to write about his parents who died when he was so young. And like the scenes where he's with his ghost parents, he just does so much incredible on a physical level, on a performance level. It's amazing. He also really sells the romance, even though it's not focused on that much. It's just incredible. That being said, Paul is also really good here. The actors who play the parents are really good here, and that's practically the entire cast. There's really not that many people in this movie, but the performances are amazing. I think really what stands out as so special, so meaningful to me about this movie is kind of what it has to say about its LGBTQ themes, and the way that it weaves its story I thought was really impressive. There's a pretty big age gap between Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal, and I was just like, oh well, that's pretty common. People often play different age gaps within movies, whatever. But then they acknowledged it. They acknowledged the context of growing up as queer, for these different characters in different times. So, Andrew Scott's character grew up at a time where queer was used as a slur and an insult, whereas Paul Mescal's character grew up in a time where gay was used as an insult. So he uses queer, and it addresses these things pretty head-on in the text, which surprised me. But then by the end of the movie, that ends up being kind of fundamental to the themes that the movie is going for in terms of the fact that they are from different generations. I can't get into what it's doing without spoiling it, and I really don't want to spoil it. I think you should go watch this movie if you can. Seriously, that's the big takeaway. But this movie, it blew my mind. I was destroyed by this movie. The editing as well is also just really concise. I really enjoy it. I think the only problems that I have with the film, and I do have some problems with the film, I understand why a lot of people don't like it, is the pacing. It doesn't fully work. There's kind of a big disconnect at points between like what the characters are doing and what their goals are, what their motives are, and the actual plot that's happening on screen. And of course this is done to kind of disorient you. There's a lot of questioning what's reality and what's not within this narrative, but at the same time it makes it a little bit of a jarring experience to watch, and not always the most engaging if you're not into what it's doing emotionally. I could see if you didn't get emotionally invested, especially into the parent stuff, since that's most of what this film is doing, that this would just be like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's got some nice shots. Who doesn't like Paul Mescal? But if you do get into that emotion, I think this kind of helps alleviate that some, because I don't know, this just really personally affected me enough that I never once was bored. I really hope you guys can't hear this airplane too loudly, but I can't stop the noise of nature. The other big problem, and it's not really a problem, I just think it's kind of an interesting choice, is the lack of focus on Paul Mescal and Andrew Scott's relationship. It really isn't in there as much as I'd like for what they go for by the end of the film. The end of the film having a twist, which is kind of predictable and easy to see coming, and I could see, again, if you're not getting into the emotion and the context and the themes, that twist, especially with how little we have of Paul's character, could seem kind of dumb and kind of cheap. It really worked for me because of the actual ending, like the ending shot, the end of the movie, and what it had to say on a thematic level. But I could see thinking that it was kind of just a cheap cop-out ending to this story. But this is not a super big problem for me. I was head over heels for this movie solely on the fact that it affected me as emotionally as it did. But it's also just, it's really well done. Like, the cinematography, the lighting, the performances, the editing, I can't think of a big problem with it other than it's a little slow, and Paul Mescal's character isn't given as much emotional importance as he probably needs for what the movie does by the end. But this has some genuinely all-timer scenes for me, and I really cannot suggest this enough if you're okay with what's in it. It's one of the best movies of the decade, in my opinion, even with its flaws. I think it's got a really important message, and you should check it out. It's interesting coming on here and talking about something that's affected me as personally as this has. Not really used to doing that so much. I mean, I talk about personal stuff on here all the time. But yeah, this was a big one for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and tell me what you think of this movie, because I've seen some really split opinions on this. Some people who I really care about their opinions didn't really like it that much. Others really loved it and were as head over heels about it as I am. What do you think? Do you think it's dumb? I don't know. All I know is Paul Mescal. Hit me up. Call me. I actually put it in my review on Letterboxd because, it's kind of a bit of a meme on how much people get on to Paul Mescal for being, hot and stuff. It's kind of like the whole Pedro Pascal thing. Almost to an uncomfortable point. There are some people who are really weird with celebrities online, always, and it gets kind of extreme in recent culture. But I literally put in my review that I struggled to even joke about Paul Mescal being super hot in this movie because all I'll think about is some of his lines and how crushing they are.
These vampires are my dog.
Yeah, I mean, this movie just really personally captures some big fears of mine, some big emotions of mine, some things that I don't even like to evaluate about myself. So I think that's important. I think that's powerful. I think movies are powerful and can invoke a lot of important emotion in people. So if a movie can do that to you, even if you don't think it's the most perfect movie in the world, I think that has just as much right in your mind as being a great movie as, like, I don't know, like Lawrence of Arabia, 2001: A Space Odyssey. I don't know, like, you know, the big greats that everybody thinks of. A similar thing happened, actually, when I watched Bones and All recently, in the hype for Challengers, which unfortunately I haven't really had the chance to check out. I realize I'm just rambling at this point, but you guys like me. You guys can bear with me here. But a similar thing happened with Bones and All. It's not the most perfect film. It's got some pacing issues, it's got some plotting issues, whatever. There are some lines in that movie, there are some themes in that movie that just, ooh, oh. So yeah, go watch a good movie. Go watch Challengers. Go tell me how it is, because I can't go see it. I'm missing so many movies. It's not easy for me to go to the theater where I'm at financially, so I'm just watching what I can. All of Us Strangers was amazing. Check it out if you can. It's on Disney Plus in like most countries in Europe. If you're in America, I believe it's on Hulu, which I think is now also Disney Plus. I don't know, America's being weird with that kind of stuff. But check it out if you're okay with what's in it. Let me know how it is. Let me know if you like this video. And I don't know, subscribe. I'm working on stuff. I'm reading a book for the Barbie video, so, you know, I do research. It's a beautiful day. I hope it's a beautiful day where you're at. It's a new month. I'm excited, and I will catch you guys in the next one. I love you. Goodbye.